Trained in core social sciences, she draws on critical disability studies, medical anthropology, kinship, and feminist ethnography to examine how ableism and patriarchy shape care and kinship. With strong feminist underpinnings, her research is guided by critical and rights-based perspectives, centering lived experiences and feminist methodologies. The second speaker is Shubha Ranganathan, who is an associate professor in the Department of Liberal Arts at Indian Institute of Technology, Hyderabad. She draws on qualitative approaches and interdisciplinary perspectives in research projects in mental health, gender, and disability. She studied local healing practices among marginalized groups and mental health and disability-related issues in India. Grounded in critical and social justice perspectives, her work focuses on lived experiences and the role of advocacy for social change. She is exploring questions about parenting and care in the context of autism as part of her engagement with the neurodiversity discourse. Our third speaker is Suchitra Shenoy, who is a writer and teacher in the Buddhist tradition. Her previous book, Mindful Parenting 2016, was on Amazon India's top parenting books list. Her first book, co-authored with Pavitra Mehta, Infinite Vision 2011, was on Amazon's top 40 management books and a finalist for the US Academy of Management's George Terry Award. It has been translated into Japanese, Portuguese, and Tamil. She teaches from the discourses of the Buddha, emphasizing practice in daily life. She holds degrees from Brandeis University and the London School of Economics. Our moderator is Shilpaa Anand, who is the head and associate professor at the Department of Humanities and Social Sciences at the Birla Institute of Technology and Science, Pilani, Hyderabad campus. Shilpaa Anand's research focus is disability studies. Her research interests include the historiography of disability and culturally different concepts of corporeality. Her papers have been published in edited volumes on disability studies in India and South Asia, as well as in scholarly journals. She moderates an email list called Disability Studies India and has co-edited multiple issues on disability for the web magazine Café de Census. Moderator.
Good afternoon, everyone, and good afternoon, authors of the books. It's been an honor to read both the books, and I'm very happy to be doing this because it's not very often that we have panels focused on disability and access and dignity at literary festivals. So we're very happy to be here. I'm speaking on behalf of all of you. I thought we could get started by reflecting a little bit on the title of the panel, which is Disability and Dignity. Both books engage with this in many different ways. And I thought the authors could reflect on the relationship between these two very complex entities, both disability and dignity. Shubha, would you like to begin?
Thanks, Shilpaa. I also want to second, Shilpaa, that really happy that there is a panel on disability and dignity at, the Lit Fest. For us, I think one of the very conscious kind of, decisions that we made in the book was to pay a lot of attention to language. And when we are speaking about the experiences of disabled mothers, we wanted to stay away from any kind of, association of disability with either, a tragedy kind of narrative or coming from a deficit perspective, or on the other hand, equally problematic, overcoming kind of narrative, right? So what instead we really wanted to focus on was the lived experiences of these disabled mothers as they were. Not necessarily in terms of, as superheroes and not necessarily as, suffering victims as such. And we speak of them as, disabled using, what is called identity-first language, specifically in order to emphasize that, their disability is a significant aspect of their identity, but also to call attention to the fact that they have been rendered disabled by systems and structures. And so in that sense, we also see it as a very relational, we see disability as relational, in relation to other, systems, structures. We focus on, relations with family, with the state, with the, medical infrastructure, and so on. So yeah, I'll stop here.
So I just wanted to read out the title of their book. It's a co-authored book by Priyasha and Shubha called Rethinking Disability Care and Motherhood, Lived Experiences of Disabled Mothers in India. Therefore, their unpacking of the relationship between disability and dignity is also very gendered in some sense. We'll now turn to Suchitra.
So firstly, thank you all for coming. It's wonderful to be at the Hyderabad Literature Festival and know half of the faces in the audience. In terms of disability, I just had a question for all of you. So how many here have broken a leg or an arm sometime in your life, right? How many of you are caregivers for elderly or have been? So these are situations where you're able-bodied and then you get put into situations where you might experience for a short while what somebody with a disability might have. And maybe in that time you struggle with going to bathrooms in public places, or maybe you struggle with, trying to see steps and how to climb them up and down. All these are just small instances of issues with dignity that we're talking about, right? And my book is about one particular organization in Dehradun, and we'll talk more about that. But one of the really small things that they do, which actually has far-reaching consequences, is everyone in the organization speaks Hindi. So there is no division between the kind of C-suite or CEO or management group where that's English speaking and the reports are done in English speaking, and everyone else is in the field and Hindi speaking, right? That's not true. Everyone from Jo Chopra, who's an American, has taught herself Hindi, to everyone down the organization. It's all run in Hindi. And that leads a level of dignity to the organization that you may not understand or even notice. The other part is nobody is called sir or ma'am. The hierarchy is removed. Everyone is bhaiya or didi. So whether it's the person who's opening the gate for you as you drive in, or whether it's the special educator in the classroom, or whether it's the physical therapist, they're all bhaiya and didi. And two of the staff members said when they first joined, they found it a bit odd, But one of the long-term volunteers says it's all about behavior and mindset. So you start mimicking it first, and it's a kind of a fake dignity maybe that you're giving. But over time, it really seeps into you and who you are. The other part that I want to touch on really briefly, which you talked about also, is that it's not always sorrow and misery and inspiration, right? So just a little bit of what Joe says, which at Latika, the organization is filled with joy. And you can't clench your teeth and achieve joy. It's a miraculous byproduct. At Latika, you see much of it everywhere. Nonprofits that work with the disabled or the poor are often seen as doing noble work, right? So people will come and say, oh, you're doing such noble work. And Joe says, or they say, it must take so much patience to work with children with disability. So she says, we smile, we nod, and we don't say anything. If people are determined to see us as saints, whatever we say will just be used as more evidence of what they already believe. But the truth is, we have never had so much fun in our lives. So I think that's a really important part also. So you have the dignity, but we must also look at and recognize the joy and the fun.
Thank you. The next question is actually about your book, Moi Moi Circle. And I thought it's important for us to also reflect on each book distinctly because they come from very different contexts and they're also in some ways addressing different audiences. Your book actually presents a kind of intertwined biographies. You know, it's as if there's a network of biographies. There's one about the organization itself, the Latika, and then you have the parents of Moi Moi, and you have all the people that populate Latika in so many different ways, the ones who are staff there and so on. So could you share a little bit about how this book evolved?
Thank you. That's a lovely question. So there are many strands that go into the book, right? As Shilpaa said, there's Latika, the organization itself that works with children with disabilities. They run a school. They do everything from early intervention and diagnosis to running also a kind of evening center for older children and young adults with disabilities. So I wanted to capture the hard work, the joy, all of that. There's the staff themselves who are actually young women who may not in their wildest of dreams have had these opportunities if they hadn't been hired and trained in physical therapy, in special education at Latika. Then there's the remarkable story of Jo Chopra, who's American, married to Ravi Chopra, who's one of India's biggest environmentalists, who was very active during the emergency. So there's their story as well. And then, of course, Moi Moi, the baby that they adopted, who led to this incredible organization. So as a writer, there are all these strands that come in. And one of the things that I love is when people read the book and they come up to me and they say, it was such an easy read. Or they say, you know, I started reading it and 2 in the morning, I was still reading it. So to me, that's a sign of that, you know, I've done my job. I've really woven these strands together. And it's not easy to answer your question, but I think the process really involved saying, I want to say all these things. I want to capture all these people in the book. So how do I weave it in a way that's not really boring? You don't want to start at the beginning and end at the end, right? So you want to be able to really mix it up and, you know, like a gorgeous kalamkari carpet or something like that. You really weave in all the colors and the strands and get the story done.
That's a great analogy to use. Thank you. And I really liked how your book also has an index of all the interviews that you've conducted. So it's almost part academic in that way.
Yeah, there was a lot of fact-checking and double-checking that went in.
Yeah. So from there, we'll move to the really academic book on our panel. Priyasha and Shubha, your book is a work of academic research that close reads the experiences of mothers living with disabilities. So the book, you know, brings together ethnographic research methods, disability studies theory, and qualitative analysis of case studies. Could you tell us a little bit about this collaborative research?
Yeah, thank you so much. Firstly, thank you so much for having us here. I think the entire process of writing was also, I think, very intentional since the start. So since the starting itself, we made sure, like Shubha said, that, you know, we didn't want to portray something which was something about overcoming or something which was a tragic story, but we wanted to focus on the banalities, like the ordinariness of everyday life. I think that is very important. What was also very intentional since the start was that we knew that we wanted to focus on, we didn't want to focus on, for instance, the burdens of care. We wanted to see how is it actually happening and what can that tell us about, let's say, the broader norms around caregiving, around motherhood. So for instance, you know, the fact that maybe a child will intuitively come towards their blind mother rather than the blind mother feeding the child and finding him. I think it's one of those ways in which we try to also, you know, understand these nuances in some senses that break down the binaries between the caregiver and the care receiver. At the same time, throughout, I mean, the entire writing process, what we also wanted to do was to reflect back on whatever norms we have around motherhood. Because I think these are norms that are across board unachievable for everyone. But for disabled mothers, the situation gets a little more, I think it has other layers to it, right? So then it is also about focusing on those things and focusing on how they creatively and practically sort of devise hacks to deal with situations that require them to be, to perform motherhood and also to be a caregiver and a care receiver. At the same time, I think the writing process, because there are it's always a really good thing to have two authors and have different opinions on, everything. It's really interesting to hear, let's say, what Shubha has to say about certain narratives, because the idea was also to know that, of course, these narratives are not simple. They are very complex. They have, of course, manifestations of ableism, but they also have subversion in them. So how do you sort of present them without flattening these nuances? And I mean, going on, we had, I think, multiple rounds of just having chart papers around us and redoing every thematic, every core strand that we wanted to do and wanted to present. And I think throughout this process, it was also interesting to also reflect back on our own positionalities and our own so-called able-bodied status. So yeah, I think throughout the process, what we've tried to do is to make sure that we present the gain that disability gain, that is there, which is, the ways in which they sort of have nuances and understandings and expertise because of their experiences and what that can present to the broader audience. So yeah.
Thank you. I also wanted to share with the audience, especially if there are students here, that this came out of a thesis. So there is hope for every small writing that you're doing. Don't lose hope. It will come together one day. Let's go on to another idea that I feel is at the heart of both of these books, and in extraordinarily distinct ways. Which is a word that you've already brought up, Priyasha, and that's the manifestations of ableism in different realms. You have ethnographic accounts of medical contexts, but also where government benefits are appropriated by non-disabled people. And in Moi Moi Circle, we have a lot of everyday, ordinary circumstances that are ableist. We have not thought about it like that for a very long time. It's only been recent, so I thought that the audience could gain from those. Suchitra, would you like to go first? Sure.
Yeah, no, that's okay. You can. So I want to actually raise one part of the book that's really difficult and challenging, but very true in everyday life, which is the huge gap between the legal standards that exist in India and the reality on the ground. India has really, I mean, from the constitution onwards, fantastic laws. But the problem is that if you're poor, if you're a girl, if you have a disability, there's very little chance of actually that coming to help and support you in the way it's supposed to be. And if you're all three, if you're a poor and a girl with a disability, it's really hopeless. So in the one case that I write about in Moi Moi Circle, it's really horrific. There was a young girl, 13 years old, who's brutally raped by her teacher, her tutor. And he comes from a wealthier family, and her parents were really poor, rickshaw wala, right? Joe, her amazing legal guy, there's this person called Rizwan Ali, and I feel you should buy the book just to read about Rizwan, decided to take it upon themselves. The girl wasn't even part of Latika. She just happened to live in Dehradun. And they formed a small team to help her as much as possible. But look at the crazy gaps that exist between the government, I mean the law and what's possible, right? So there's a really good act called POSCO, which is the protection of children from sexual assault, right, or sexual offenses. And in POSCO, it's really clearly said that the child can choose who interprets for you. And there's also a Supreme Court directive that says the child does not have to see the perpetrator in court. In this case, both those things were completely ignored. She wasn't given a voice until Rizwan kind of stepped in to be her lawyer. Bizarrely, she was a child with a 50% mental disability, had a certificate to prove it. Bizarrely, they assigned her a sign language interpreter, right? Nothing to do with the disability she has. Then finally, Rizwan was able to prove that because her speech is slurred, who knows better than her mother what she's saying? And so then they were able to use that. Her clothes were taken, but nobody asked for DNA samples. Then when DNA samples were asked for, the girl, the mother, and the perpetrator were brought in the same car to go give your samples, right? So you can just imagine the trauma. Meanwhile, the tutor was not even arrested, and when the court demanded age proof, the parents were so desperate to help because they wanted him to be seen as a minor that they gave two certificates. One that said he was 14 years of age, one that said that he was 17 years of age. Both certificates were accepted, right? So here, in just these quick sketches that I want to give you, it shows you that we have these incredible laws, we have this incredible setup, but yet there's this huge gap between what is possible and what is not. This has, as these stories could possibly has, it has a kind of happy ending or hopeful ending. Rizwan really fights it through, sees the case through. After this car journey, the senior police officer steps in and says, never again in all of Dehradun will this ever happen. Rizwan is able to get money unlocked, not just for this girl, but also for 14 other cases. So there is a lot of hope in what can be done, but I just wanted to use the legal example to answer your question.
Yeah. So I think, Shilpaa, you very succinctly said that, of course, manifestation of ableism is in a lot of state contexts, etc., but it's also very in like the everyday life as well, right? So I would like to talk about one of the interlocutors that we had. Her name was Gayatri, and she's a wheelchair user. So when she conceived her child and when she got pregnant, she went to a government hospital to seek medical support and understand what is it like, etc., etc. And the first thing that the doctor told her as a wheelchair user, the doctor said, "How will you get up on this bed?" Now, there could be many ways in which this could have been dealt with, but the fact was that she went to different doctors and the question was still the same. How will you get up on this bed? Never that maybe we can create some provision of, checking her in different ways. And that sort of is also a recurring theme in other women who have interviewed as well. So for instance, another mother said that she went to a genetic doctor and the doctor said that, why did you get pregnant in the first place, right? Now, the question is that constantly there is this questioning of capacity that is sort of evoked at every stage, be it at the starting of choosing or wanting to be a mother, to then the medical infrastructure, which is highly inaccessible in, of course, physical ways, but also otherwise. The doctors, the nurses, most of them hold a lot of biases, which also sort of manifest in ways both subtle and also very direct in this case. And at the same time, after one chooses to be a mother or becomes a mother, it's not that the battle is over, right? It's almost that they become mothers and then the question is, how will you take care? Now, if the here is also where the family sort of comes in. So a lot of times in the work that we've done and in the interviews that we've taken, there were women who spoke of their conjugal families, their families in which they're married to, being cut off. So they said that, we don't want to be in relation with you, we don't want to take the care burden in some ways, and, we don't want to be associated because we know that it will inevitably come on us. And which is also such a counterproductive notion, because the question is also that if the woman is fit to care and the support that she needs is already taken from her. So it again brings her back to the position of wanting, some support to to give care. And here we also see that at the same time, while this loop is going on, children become a source of hope. Disabled mothers that we've interviewed spoke highly about how their children and they share a very interdependent relationship with them. So, for instance, children would understand their needs more proactively and respond to them more proactively than, let's say, adults or other family members. And that is something that we also have to understand, that, of course, there is a lot of ableism, of course, there is a lot of resistance, but then, of course, there are also rays of hope and ways in which you sort of tackle and speak back to these sort of manifestations in many ways, right? Yeah, I hope I've answered the question.
Thank you. I think both these interventions kind of bring out the many ways in which able-bodiedness is built into structures and mindsets and emotional spaces, apart from very physical environments as well. From here, I thought we could go to a few excerpts from both the books. Because we want to encourage the audience to buy these books. They're both available at the festival, and it would be great to hear from the authors what they thought was the best parts of their books.
Okay, so I'm going to read a bunch of small bits from the book, and I'm picking up from this idea that Priyasha just talked about how mothers were trying to establish their capacity, and in many ways, early on after their decision to be a mother and so on, much of their emotional labor and much of their work was in trying to sort of prove that they are fit to care and their capacity. So, for instance, one of the blind mothers who was interviewed, when talking about expectations and being a parent with a disability, this woman who we call Anshika, she said, and in her words, "When you have a child, there is no option but to do whatever is required. With Ritisha, she expects us to do everything, whether we are blind or not blind. There is no concession. If she asks me to climb a hill, I will have to do it, irrespective of whether I can see or not. It is practical, and I also do it. And why shouldn't I? One thing is that I have made a conscious decision that I do not want her to miss out on any experiences in life because I cannot see. That is not excusable." Now, obviously, from this, one can see the kind of, the sort of tall order in some ways that Anshika is really, setting up for herself, and also the kinds of, in some ways, trying to establish her, capacity and trying to sort of compensate in some ways. But on the other hand, there's so much of complexity as well, and so you had many other ways in which women also contested, these ideas of normative motherhood or ideal parenting. So, for instance, and I want to give you a sense of, both, because that's really what is at the heart of this book, the way in which they were kind of balancing, both these expectations to sort of prove that, I can also be a mother and be fit, and on the other hand say that, wait a minute, what is it, it doesn't mean that motherhood has to be in only a particular kind of way. So, for instance, another mother, Swati, she said that motherhood is not always about cooking, cleaning, or taking care of their lunch boxes. There are other elements, right? And so in some ways, I mean, she's also trying to sort of, redefine and sort of what actually motherhood really means. And I think that's something which is interesting also, which has a much larger kind of, relevance as well, right? And what we really wanted to sort of show through this was the very particular and unique kind of expertise in many ways which these disabled mothers, had accumulated, which would only be possible from their disability, identity. And in that sense, we sort of, we think about, ideas like Cassandra Hartley talking about disability expertise, which is, how can we sort of draw from the lived experiences of, disabled persons and the unique kind of, expertise that they have. So one of the sort of central and core kind of themes in the book was how there eventually over a time was also a shift in many of these women's approaches from overcoming their disability to embracing their disability. So over time, their focus shifts from proving their capacity to mother to claiming expertise by also embracing their disability, as well as the limitations posed by their disability on the performance of motherhood. And as part of this embracing disability and the limitations, they're also enlisting support from, children, the kind of examples which Priyasha just gave. Ultimately, I mean, what we really wanted to do through that was to really reflect back on our ideas about what do we mean really by normative motherhood. What do we mean also, how can we sort of rethink also disability from the perspective of, disability gain as well. Yeah.
So given that there are a fair number of students and parents and caregivers in the audience and teachers, here are some of the lessons from Latika, the organization. One is paying attention. There was somebody called Paula who came and she thought she was going to be at Latika only for a year or so. 12 years later, she was still there. And she really helped build the organization and kind of set up systems. So she taught the school teachers and assistants how to pay attention, how to see. So she writes saying, an improvement in the attention span of one child. She could now complete a puzzle without demanding adult attention. An increase in confidence in another child standing in line for 10 seconds only, but in line, oh wow. And in this age of kind of helicopter parenting and really pushing kids really hard, I think it's really good to be exposed to, like you were talking about, to parents who have children with disabilities, where it completely changes what matters and what you measure. The second thing was play matters greatly. Play matters to all children, but especially to children with disabilities. They really need it. We made sure, Paula says, that Latika was a fun, playful place, even when we were doing very serious work. It's so important that a place not be miserable. So play is not squashed into a tight schedule, but it's an active component of how teaching takes place, how skills are introduced, and how even the teachers themselves learn. And the third thing, which is really beautiful, and I think parents worldwide, teachers worldwide should really absorb this, which is children want to learn. It's really simple but profound. It doesn't matter if the child has a disability or not, or what the disability is. Children are just curious and thinking beings who are desirous of learning. So you really need to figure out, if the child wants to learn, what should the teacher do? The teacher has to learn how to work with that curiosity, that desire, and then you just become a facilitator in the process of learning. And now just to end, if I have a few seconds, just to give you a sense of, the whole place and the organization. So Moi Moi was the child because of whom this entire organization turned out. Moi Moi met many famous people in her life. The Vice President of India, Pope John Paul II, and His Holiness, the Dalai Lama. What her life showed, though, is not a path to the famous, but a focus on the little folk, on the forgotten, the downtrodden, and the children with disabilities whom nobody pays attention to. Many decades ago, Jo McGowan, a bright-eyed girl from the United States of America, and Ravi Chopra, a serious young man from India, they met, fell in love, and settled in the foothills of the Himalayas. They had 2 homemade children and adopted their third. The third baby changed everything. At the down-to-earth level, Moi Moi's presence led to an organization that employs over 100 individuals and has helped thousands of children. It's led Jo to be the voice of many, many children with disabilities and given solace to hundreds of parents. It's provided careers filled with purpose and meaning. But at the non-rational, almost spiritual level, Moi Moi gave in an unexpected ways. She was non-speaking and yet shared deep conversations. To be non-mobile and yet participate in long walks and dances. To be completely dependent on a whole set of caregivers, from feeding through a tube to changing your diapers, and yet have them feel grateful and feel a deep sense of friendship with Moi Moi. These are profound things. They are also not limited to her lifespan. As St. John Chrysostom, the Archbishop of Constantinople, said very long ago, more than 2,000 years ago, and his words really ring true for Moi. Those whom we love and lose are no longer where they were. They are now wherever we are. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Please give them a hand before we go to the Q&A. I think we have enough time now and also enough reason to pose questions or offer comments to the authors. So I'd request, if you could just raise your hand and keep your question brief or your comment. Yeah, there's one. Third row.
Thank you. Amazing talk. I'm a disabled person myself, and when I saw this talk on the lineup, I was incredibly excited because, I mean, like you guys said, rarely is there conversation about disability. But one of the main questions I had throughout your entire talk is, because I think you also mentioned how the structures that are set in our society, they aren't really made for people with disabilities, right? The laws, like physical structures themselves aren't really made. So what really are, steps that are being taken from an accessibility point, right? Because, I mean, you talked about like institutes that are put together, NGOs to help children, which is amazing, right? But when you leave these places, when you have to interact with the world, which is very inaccessible, how do you do that? Because one thing that I was thinking when I came here is this event in general is not accessible, right? Because I use a rollator as well to walk. And today morning it was like a huge debate of, do I use my cane today, do I use my rollator? So I sent Hyderabad Lit Fest a message asking, is the event wheelchair accessible? And I got a reply back saying yes, but then I showed up here and it's not. There are chairs everywhere. And I struggled a lot just to get into this room with the way the chairs are placed and stuff, right? So, I mean, it was very funny to me that I was attending a talk about disability, but the event in itself is not accessible. And a lot of people, I mean, I'm really privileged to have been able to come here, but I know for a fact if it was a day when I'd had to use my rollator or my wheelchair, I wouldn't have been able to make it. So I just want to know what really is being done from an accessibility point of view, or if you guys have anything to talk about from an accessibility point of view, or what can be done. Yeah.
I guess I don't have to ask the state question. It's come from the audience. So, you want to begin?
So not very much. I completely agree with you. I think it's exceedingly hard to live in India. And I don't know if you in the audience know of or have read Tarini Mohan's book called Life Quake. So she's somebody who was working at Goldman Sachs and World Bank and stuff like that and had a horrific accident in Uganda and then was pretty much in a wheelchair, not movable, and walks with a stick, and her whole life changed. And she had to decide whether she wanted to live as a person with disability in the US or India. And there's a whole bunch of things that would work for her if she was in the US, which is exactly what you're saying, which is infrastructure, right? Whether it's the bus and the thing that comes down and you just wheel onto it, or so much other stuff. But in India, you have the love, you have the caregivers, you have all of that. And she herself personally chose India. That said, I think there is more change now than we have seen in the past. So in November, I was at this event called the India Inclusion Summit, which is the country's largest gathering of people with disabilities. And there's a lot of vibrant movement there that's happened. There's something called Tech Labs, if I remember correctly, and it's actually a kind of VC fund that funds various companies that produce tech-based solutions for people with disabilities. There's an amazing museum that I'm really keen to go to in Bangalore called MAP, M-A-P, which is, again, very, very disability friendly, and they often have exhibitions taking into consideration multi-dimensional, multi-ableism, access in that sense. So it's not at all changing at the pace we would want it to, but I'm hopeful.
I just wanted to add, and thank you so much for saying that and for sharing. I really, really appreciate, because to me, that kind of question, that I'm going to attend a panel or a talk on disability and the event is not accessible, I think that gets to the heart of the issue. And in many ways, I mean, there are various forms of inaccessibility also, even in terms of, navigating this large space was a huge challenge for, me as well. So we do have, the Accessible India campaign, but I think also the thing is that often, accessibility is just seen as like a checkbox of, things to have, and it's not. It's an ongoing and in some ways a never-ending really, process, but it's also about contextualizing it, right? And that is where, there are, gaps. I mean, so, they will tell you that it is, wheelchair accessible, but when you actually, when you actually try to sort of, navigate it, I mean, that's from the vantage point of, again, someone who's not a wheelchair user, but someone who's actually using, you will find the, the gaps in that sense, right? So I think we also need to sort of stop thinking about disability as this, this sort of separate kind of, space which is cut off from, society, and those people who do that kind of work. It's relevant for all of us. And similarly, accessibility, accommodations are relevant and, make the world a much better place to be for all of us.
Yeah, sorry. I just had one thing to add. Thank you for that question. And this is, I think, something that all of us were wondering in our heads. So finally someone said it. But also, I think, adding to what Shubha is saying, I think it's also time we center disabled voices. I think it's time we take their experiences and take their word as seriously as we would as for a non-disabled person to say, yes, it's wheelchair accessible. Because it's also about that, and I think there are a few organizations that I know of that are doing some work. There are now, like Suchitra said, that there are now coming up and they are doing the work. And I want to also just cite somebody who I had interviewed for the book, who said that the non-disabled population benefits as much from us as the disabled population. So I think it's just that's the crux of it, right? So yeah.
Much for that question. Can we have? Yeah.
I have one thing to add and two questions. One is wheelchair access is not just disabled, it is old people also. All right, so that's not a disability thing. I think this is just age accessibility is not thought of in India. That's one. Two questions. One is you talk a lot about normative motherhood. So a question is, are either, both or either of you, do you have a lived experience of motherhood? So where do you get your, normative motherhood concepts? And second, have you covered neurodiverse mothers, and what do you think, because there's no question, there's been no mention of neurodiverse mothers, or even mothers who are different in that they are outliers and therefore in that sense society disabled though not really disabled, and what have you said in your book about stuff, mothers like that?
Chapter 4 then comes to the front.
Yeah, thanks. In the first chapter, we also talk about how we are approaching the book from our, positions. And I do have lived experience. I am a mother. I am a mother, a parent of a neurodivergent, child. I think that, and that's something that yeah, yeah. So I'm coming to that as well. So we do explore the intersection of neurodivergence and motherhood in one of the chapters, our chapter 4, where what we do is, because typically, again, neurodiversity is often something that is not always in conversation with the disability, discourse. But here we bring narratives of two mothers who, one of whom is neurodivergent, right? And a mother of a neurodivergent child, right? And this is a mother who actually discovered her diagnosis of autism, in fact, after the delivery, a few months after the delivery of her child. So it was very interesting how she was negotiating with both, being a new mother and also the autism diagnosis, and what does that mean in terms of, meeting her own needs as well as, the needs. So caring for herself as well as, caring for, the child. So that's one chapter where we're also talking about, care in terms of, care for, oneself, right? And we also recount another case of another, mother who's a parent of a neurodivergent, child, adult actually, right? And in terms of, again, how many of, the ideas of parenting are sort of, subverted in many ways, right? So yeah, to answer your, question of, when you say that, you're speaking back against normative motherhood, where are we getting those ideas? Lived experience, yes, but then I also, for me personally, I think also speaking back to certain kinds of scholarship, like, the whole parenting, scholarship, a lot of which also comes from mainstream, psychology and, parenting and pop kind of, psychology, right, has certain received ideas about, how one should parent, or even the fact that parenting is exclusively a sort of something that the mother does.
One more question. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much for such a in-depth conversation. But my question is again to Shubha and, for your book. So it has been generally, and research over decades has also shown that children who grow up with very adverse experiences, end up in adolescent or later on in life with mental health challenges and struggle with emotional stability. So I was wondering, while you were working with these mothers, was that a thread also that you explored? How the children of these mothers are coping, and how they are, or if you have any other study that focused on that. Thanks.
Thank you so much for that question. So we didn't really tap into narratives from, let's say, children, because I think it was also because of the resources and the time available for conducting the interviews. But at the same time, I want to say that again, going back to mothers who were sharing their experiences, of course there were fears that, which is also something which is sort of told to you. It's not which is internalized in many ways. About, that you don't want to bring a disabled child in this world, and questions about that. But I think the crux of the matter is that there were also people and parents who said that our parents were blind and we are here on our feet and we've done everything, so we can take care of our children as well. So it's also, I think, about rethinking from that space that, of course, there is, I understand where you're coming from, that there is, of course, literature on adverse mental health effects, etc. But I think we also have to now see the fact that while that is there, how are they navigating, right? And what navigations and what nuances went into this process. Shubha, do you want to add? But yeah, so... Yeah, sorry, but that's what I was saying, sorry.
No, just very quickly, I mean, so this idea that, adverse experiences in childhood result in later, I think basically trauma in childhood, sort of can be connected, potentially. But then somehow imagining that as a child of a disabled parent, inevitably the trauma is about that disability, I think that's a jump that we are making in our head. Right? So there's all kinds of, childhood traumas which people, go through, whether their parents are disabled or not. So sort of, cut off that link between automatically assuming that, a disabled mother will result in greater trauma for the child. That's something we hope to do.
Okay, we have one last question. Please keep it very short.
This is for Suchitra, and perhaps for the rest of you, but in the interest of time. How has the book changed you?
So the book itself was a multi-year project. It took me more than 5 years. The pandemic came in the way. So I lived with the material for a very long time. One of the most moving parts for me, to answer even your question a little bit, was the in-depth interviews with parents. Because these are all mainly fairly low economic class. Many of them have moved from Aurangabad, Allahabad to Dehradun because they've somehow heard of Latika's incredible offerings. And just documenting, listening, interviewing was deeply moving. The other part that was a lot of, that was touching, but also really, changed me in that sense, is being at the school. So there are, about 100, 120 kids, all with very different disabilities who come in. And for them, it's their space. So to see that sense of pride and joy and happiness, and to also realize and learn how difficult it is to mainstream any of these children, right? And how our systems of school, college, etc., just don't have that ability. And again, I think things are changing, to the first person's question, but for me it really changed and opened up a whole world, and I feel very deeply connected to the world of disability and to the people, in there. So.
To round off this session, thank you for being a great audience. Also, the audience has grown, and thanks to all of you as well.
So I'm going to be here for the rest of the day. If any of you pick up your books, I'm very happy to stop and sign them. And I'll be here tomorrow as well. Thank you so much for coming.